Hi again. We left off with the Emancipation Proclamation, which, if you remember, does not free the slaves. It freed the slaves in the rebellious states alone, which weren't under the authority of the United States government. But it was symbolic. It was a document that started to shift the northern ideas of the war to focus more on the issue of slavery. A lot of Northerners didn't like that. There were draft riots in New York City and other places with people not wanting to fight the war over slavery, but their objective had been just to keep the United States together. But black soldiers were recruited in the North after the Emancipation Proclamation. They still endured a lot of racism and discrimination. They were paid less than white soldiers. They had to have a white officer in charge of their regiment, so the regiments were segregated, and that would be the case until the Vietnam War in the United States, unfortunately. A lot of times their jobs were either to be doing something like digging the latrines, so digging trenches or the bathroom area, or doing cooking, something not in terms of actual fighting. And when they did fight, if you've seen the movie Glory with Matthew Broderick and Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman, it's based on a battle in South Carolina, the 34th Massachusetts Regiment, which was a black regiment, and they were sent to the front lines, where if you're on the front line, you're the ones most likely to die. So they still endured a lot of discrimination and hard circumstances, but they were recruited in larger numbers after the Emancipation Proclamation. All right, we get into 1863 and lots of heavy fighting in this area of Northern Virginia, into this famous battle at Gettysburg that we'll talk about. Also a big one over in Mississippi. But I wanted to focus on something that happens here in Virginia. 1863 is going to be a big turning point for the war. We've seen it symbolically become about slavery after the Emancipation Proclamation, which again didn't do anything concrete in terms of freeing slaves. But these battles are going to start to turn in favor of the North. And there's a huge battle at Chancellorsville, which is in Virginia, Northern Virginia. Now, because it has Ville in it, it sounds like a big city, but it's not. Let's go up to Chancellorsville. You see that it's pretty much just fields and trees. It's starting to get a little bigger as Washington, D.C. has grown and people commute there. It's about an hour away from D.C., so it is a long drive. I hate when it spins you around like this. But there are lots of trees there, and that's going to be significant. But there was a house here known as the Chancellor House. You see some cannons in this open field near where the Chancellor House was. But it was pretty much just fields and trees at the time and one big house. If we go back here, Lincoln has gotten rid of McClellan. McClellan didn't do too much of anything. McClellan hates Lincoln, is actually going to run against him as president. McClellan will be a Democrat, Lincoln a Republican in the 1864 election. He went through, here's some random trivia. Let me go back here. Sideburns, for any of you guys who may have sideburns, come from this guy, Ambrose Burnside. Burnside, with the ugly mutton chop things, is the one that sideburns will be named for. He replaces McClellan. He loses battles, and so Lincoln is stuck in this mess, and now he has Joseph Hooker. General Joseph Hooker. After McClellan, you had Burnside, and after Burnside, you have Hooker. They're the ones tasked to try to defeat Robert E. Lee in the Virginia area. Now, there's still fighting going on in other places, but we just don't have time in a survey class to do all of that. Hooker is known for being this good-looking guy. He's got his blue eyes and his blonde hair. Some more random trivia. The name Hooker was used for prostitutes before this, but when you look at the usage of the word, it increases dramatically after Joseph Hooker because he was a fan of women who worked in that profession. But Hooker, his men are primarily over here, they're gonna cross this river and be lined up over here in Chancellorsville. Down here was Fredericksburg. You still had some Union forces who were going to cross over at that time, but the Confederates in red under Robert E. Lee held that Confederate territory. Hooker's men were planning to cross the river. This is about 12 miles away, 10 to 12 miles, can't quite remember, and then march down to the town of Fredericksburg and take on Robert E. Lee. Well, Stonewall Jackson, who we've talked about before, is going to make a really famous march. He quietly marches his troops down this road to the south. They're going to attack this flank. So the flank, the outside of where your troops are gathered. Now you're going to have your weaker troops farther away in this instance in case a direct assault happens. You need more experienced people closer by. Now you're still going to put weaker troops on the front lines, but based on their camp, you have the weaker troops in the back. So these troops were out here. All of a sudden they see some squirrels and deer kind of running out through the woods, and Jackson's men come and attack. And Hooker's men, they just fall apart, and all of the guys are going to go back across the river. So Jackson's men come out, if you're following the mouse, of the trees over here. Should have gotten, let's see. That's from a different class. Let me do this. So we'll do a big J for Jackson. Oh, it's an ugly J. Jackson's men push forward, and Hooker's men are going to run back across the river. So this huge success for the Confederates. It's a Confederate victory at Chancellorsville. But Jackson will be killed in this battle. Not by Union forces. He will be killed by friendly fire. Jackson likes to do his own reconnaissance. Comes from the verb connaître in French. Also, this is just going to be known as your recon work. To shorten that, if you need to spell it, it's to know. So, to know where your enemies are. Recon is dangerous work. But Jackson liked to do, you wouldn't send a general to do that, but Jackson liked to do his own recon. And he will be killed right in this area. Let's go back to Google Earth. Well, I'm getting close to... Here's the visitor center. I had an internship up here. Let's see how many pictures we got. But just in this area back here, Jackson will be killed. You see that it's still dense with trees and forest. Jackson has come back over the river down here, the Rappahannock River. He's come back through. It's dark. You hear gunfire happening all around, and the men, the Confederates in the line here, start to hear voices and horses coming. They think it's the Union cavalry. Jackson will be shot coming back on his horse. He's shot twice in his left arm, saying, "Don't shoot," and holding his arm up, and once in the right arm. He does not die there. His arm is amputated, and he dies a week later from pneumonia. More random trivia. His arm is buried separately from the rest of his body. They thought his arm was worth preserving, but this was bad for the South. One of several bad things happening in the summer of 1863, because Lee famously said Jackson, before Jackson died, said Jackson has lost his left arm, but I have lost my right arm.